So hello, today I'm at St Mary St Peter Church in Fairstead in Essex, and I'd like to talk to you about the history of the church and the village itself. So Fairstead is a village in Essex. It's 6 miles from Braintree, and by foot it's 3 miles from Cressing Temple. Fairstead is isolated and surrounded by Essex farmland. A tributary of the River Tur passes through here, and the elevation is 45 metres or 146 feet in old money. Today's population is around 300. Now Fairstead is a Saxon name meaning fair or pleasant place. In nearby Turling, 30 5th century coins were ploughed up, and a hoard of 3rd century Roman pots containing more coins were discovered by the Victorians. So we can be sure a settlement was here. Now Fairstead's church itself contains a huge amount of Roman brick and tile, meaning a villa was close by, and we'll see that later. Now during the Saxon period, Brictmer, son of Quivina, was the thane here. And Quivina was a Celtic woman, a noble woman at that. And Quivina owned 51 manors before the Norman conquest. Now in 1086, Turold was the Norman lord of the manor here in Fairstead. 4 villagers, 10 smallholders and 3 slaves were here. And there were 4 plough teams, 32 pigs and 124 sheep across these very fields, and 3 beehives which were a sign of great wealth. And 1 mill, most possibly a water mill. Now Ranulph Peveril was the tenant-in-chief, and Ranulph Peveril would marry Engelrica, said to be the mistress of William the Conqueror himself. Ranulph himself was born in Normandy, France, and became Earl of Essex, and would end his days in Hatfield Peveril, not far from here. And this very town is named after him when he was 42. The manor would pass on to William de Ferrers, a knight who saw military service in Palestine in the siege of Acre in 1190. This was the 3rd Crusade, and William de Ferrers fought against the army of Saladin the Great. By his side were the Knights Templar and the Knights Hospitalier of St John of Jerusalem. Now remember that Cressing's temple, only a short distance from here, was granted to the Knights Templar in 1136 by Matilda, wife of King Stephen. By the siege of Acre, Cressing was the largest of the Templar estates in Essex. It's a fascinating period in our history. Now, Fairstead's manor remained with the de Ferrers family until Henry VI of 1471, and from where it passed on to the Cornwall family until Lord William Cornwall of 1610. Now, William was born here and he would die here aged 55. So, like any house and home, it would be passed from family to family until 1720. The manor was sold to the South Sea Company. 1720 was the year that the 1720 was the year that the company collapsed, and it was known as the South Sea Bubble. The last I could discover was that a General James Oglethorpe became its owner. A British soldier and a member of Parliament and a philanthropist, the general would found the colony of Georgia in today's United States of America. Now, Oglethorpe led British troops against Spanish forces in Florida at the siege of St. Augustine in 1740, the Spanish invasion of Georgia in 1742, and the Jacobite Rising in 1745. In York, England. In 1754, General Oglethorpe moved here to Fairstead's manor, and within 2 years the old general was off fighting once more, this time in the Prussian War. Now, Fairstead was home to a very famous English poet and farmer, Thomas Tusser, who in 1557 wrote, "100 good points of husbandry." Now, Tusser would farm here for a while, leaving when the plague struck, and it was written, he traded at large in oxen, sheep, dairies and grain, and all kinds to no profit. He spread his bread with all sorts of butter, yet none would stick thereon. Tusser would move to London and Manningtree, Essex. I absolutely love these old iron signs, and you can see the wooden board with Fairstead and the D just hanging on there. And on the other side, Fairstead's just about hanging on this side as well, and the board looks even in worse shape. But the councils today, they replace these lovely old signs with these plastic or sort of white paint, I don't know what they are, sort of white signs, and they seem to fall down so easy. Shame don't keep these old signs going. Just want to get your attention to this sign here. You see these signs all across Fairstead on every pole and lamp post. We have the same problem in Ingatestone, where they want to put these massive pylons across these lovely fields here. Let's show you this old post box set in this wall. Quite common in Essex towns, but I believe this one is a Victoria Regina. If you look at the lettering at the top. How many layers of paint is on there? Fantastic. Now just over 1 mile away we have Fuller Street, and I'll show you the local pub. So here we have the Square and Compasses pub from 1652. Originally it was 2 farm cottages. Today I read it's on the walk known as the Essex Way, which runs from White Knotley to Great Waltham, and you can see it on the phone box there. The unusual pub named after tools used by carpenters and stonemasons. When this building was built in 1652, the Royal Navy dockyard at Harwich was built. Let's have a look in this unusual phone box. It's been converted, so we've got a defibrillator in here and a map for the walkers. The sun is desperate to break through. It's not been cooperative today so far. Now in England, if they repair or cut the road in any way, they have to repair it, put it back. But what I like is they always put the mark in just where they repaired. Looks like there's another development coming here as well. A battery storage facility and substation, solar farm. It's got a scale compared to Stansted Airport. So now we've made our way to St Mary St Peter's Church. The walls are flint and pebble rubble off local fields, and the dressings are limestone and clunch, which is a hard chalk, and a large amount of Roman brick, which makes up the walls and window jambs. We'll have a closer look in a minute. And now the sun is come out in full cooperation. Now we are looking at the north porch, and this is 15th century. It's built in oak in 2 bays. And we shall have a closer look at the structure. If you look, you can see where the dowel pegs are. Now if we go inside, now the north porch has cambered tie beams and curved braces. And you can see how they've attached the beam to the outer wall, the wall plate, the big iron strap. Now if we move forward, got an unusual lamp, which I thought at first was made of iron, but it's actually wood. It's quite unusual. And it's quite unusual as well. They've got a protective sort of half towards the north door itself. I guess the elements here are quite dicey. Now the doorway itself, the surround, is 14th century. And what's quite unusual is that the actual jambs here are made in oak. So you can clearly see the stone and then the oak. Now if we have a look at this hinge here, which is quite unusual, you can notice the crosses on it. And on the right side we've got a family piece of graffiti, I guess, or is it a fish from the Christian period? So now we shall enter this lovely old church. Shall take my cap off. Oh, it's so nice when the sun's out. We shall pan around to the north entrance so we can see what it looks like. So we are standing in the nave, which measures 30 feet by 19 feet. Now it's 11th century, making it very early Norman nave indeed. If I go all the way back, as far as we can go, gives you an idea of its scale. Now if we pan around to the north wall, we've got our first window. Now this is 11th century, it's very early and original. Now if we pan around to the south wall, we can see where the original doorway was. And it will become more obvious when we go outside. But this is the south doorway, it's 13th century. And a beautiful vase with some flowers in it. Now if we pan upwards, we can see quite a big crack. Now if you notice engineers have put a plastic reading device to monitor the crack, to see if it gets any worse. And you see this in various churches. Now we're going to look at the roof, the beams themselves. Now we have 3 cambered tie beams, and they're 17th century. And again, you can see how the iron strap attaches the beam to the wall. And you've got the carved sole plate there as well, a wall plate. Now we're going to pan around to where the south doorway is, and you'll see on the wall there's a couple of crosses there. Now we concentrate on the lower cross. This is a cross pate, meaning a footed cross with convex and curved ends, and it was an early medieval heraldric and crusaders cross from around the 13th century. So you'll also notice the first wall painting, which is illegible. I couldn't tell you the date of this, but it may well be in connection to a wall painting on the south wall, which is James I. So we shall pan around, and you can see a notice board there, which gives information on the church. 900 years, it's incredible. And I have actually seen a peacock around these parts, which you see in the corner there. So just behind the board we have a memorial. Now the Tottenham Memorial is from World War I. It's for the 8 men from here who never returned. Notice John Brock and William Brock. Were they brothers perhaps? And also Albert and Percy Doe, maybe brothers as well. 8 men from this small community like this, it must have been difficult. Now underneath we've got a memorial for World War II. And the 2 men, Sidney and Arthur, who paid the ultimate price in the Second World War. Now beneath the memorials we have a book which is worth looking at. Now this book has been made in conjunction with Turling, a neighbouring village, and it will list the men of both villages. And as you see, it lists each page for each man. And it goes into great detail. For example, John Brock was a farm worker here, would have worked these very fields. And his brother William was killed only in the previous year. Now to the side of memorials, we have a 13th century painting with unknown figures. We have a Teutonic style cross with a stake at the base. I'd be fascinated to know who and why these paintings were made. Now the stake at the bottom is designed to go into the ground, also in connection with Teutonic Knights. If we look at the bottom, we've got a figure wearing a hat and possibly horns. And now we're looking at the south window, and it's "I am the Good Shepherd" with Jesus. And this stonework is 11th century, very early Norman. Beautiful window. Back to the south wall, if we look, there's another 13th century painting, looks like three figures, with another Teutonic style cross, a stake at the base. And if we look at the base, we have an early medieval cross, and there's a total of 7 crosses in this church. Is it there? Now these crosses are believed to be consecration crosses. Typically there were 12 crosses. Most of them would be high enough to have a candle beneath, and a consecration cross show where a bishop has anointed a church with holy water. Now there are 2 sets of consecration crosses here. This church is dedicated to both St Mary and St Peter, so it must be presumed that the second dedication of St Peter is connected to the extension of the chancel around 1240. Now if we walk a short way towards the door, I'd like to look at this coat of arms. This is the royal coat of arms of King George III. So now we're going to pan around to the south wall. Sorry to jump around, but there's so many things to look at here. So we're going to look at this painting here. So this painting is described as Pray for the King. It's black letter inscription, injunction to pray for King James I and the royal family. And you can see traces of border 1625. If you look, you can see the word King, Excellent, and Prince, and you can see the border there. So now we shall pan around to the north wall, and we're going to look at the pulpit. So this pulpit is on a single base, and is most likely Victorian or even Edwardian. Could possibly be Edwardian, looks a bit newer. Now we're looking at that yellow work above the pulpit, and this is the sedilia. Notice how the west bay has been cut away. Oh, sorry, I've got the wrong bit, sorry. Go back a bit. Start again. Reredos, we're looking at the reredos. On the north wall, it's cut back remains of an ornamental ribbed vault with bosses cut back into the wall. It's early 15th or 16th century. It's very rare, and I've never seen one like this anywhere else. We shall walk up these steps of the pulpit. Can't resist. Bible, Holy Bible on the floor, so I'm not going to put my foot on that. But if we have a look, don't know if these are Tudor roses. It's got so much paint on it, it'd be interesting to take the layers off and have a look at the detail. Now we shall pan around back to the south wall, and it looks like an opening, like a doorway, and it almost looks like a fireplace. Shall have a closer look. Now this is in fact the opening for the original rood stairs. If I put the light on, we can see the steps. It does look like it's been converted into a fireplace. But what's interesting for me is beneath, got these tiles. So here we have, which looks like a glazed tile. Regular floor tile. We have beautiful carving. You can see the rebate there. Lower down we have this. You can still see where the masons hacked it out. Fascinating. And here we have a font which I've got no information on, but it looks like the top is marble. If we take the top off, beautiful bowl. Now we're looking at these beautiful hand-carved pews. There's 14 in total, and they've got moulded top rails. With panelled bench ends and linen fold ornamentation. These are early 16th century. So you can see the linen fold decoration there. And what I find interesting is it's all worn, sort of people's clothing and so on have been rubbing against it for 500 years. And if you look down here, I've got a feeling these boards are second hand, even when they were put in, because everyone's got a bit of a recess. I mean, look at that. It's just a solid lump of oak. We swing around here. See, it's from something else. So now we shall walk towards the chancel itself. So the chancel measures 30 feet by 16 feet, and the western end towards us is built in the 11th century. It's very early Norman. And if we look at the Norman arch, it's 11th century. I'm going to go inside the chancel and turn around. Notice the Roman brick. It's possibly from the 3rd century. Yeah, I did say that, the 3rd century. This is the facing brick. So all of the windows in here are 13th century. Most likely they were installed when the chancel was extended. And if you look to my right, there's a lower window which is very rare. And a lot of these windows and doors will make more sense when we're outside. Now we shall make our way forward. Now we are looking at the sedilia, which is a series of seats. Now notice how the west bay has been cut away for the modern doorway. Now what you can't see is the outside. There's a doorway here. Now the middle pier is finished with octagonal shaft. It's incredibly old. This is 1240. Just noticed a tiny little flower there. Now the word sedilia is a plural of Latin sedile, which is seat, and it's used during Mass for the priest and his assistant. Now if we have a look, there's two memorials here. Now the top one, this is 1694 on slate, and it's Joshua Blower, the elder, who was rector of Fairstead parish for 43 years here. Now in 1464, the Bank of England is established. Queen Mary II dies from smallpox in Kensington Palace in London, and King William III becomes the sole monarch. Also, the slave ship Hannibal in the Atlantic Ocean, aboard half of the 692 Benin slaves from Africa, die aboard, and this all happened in 1694. Now underneath we've got a memorial 1656. So this must have been the first memorial. It's also on slate. This is to Elizabeth Oliver. She was the second wife of Joshua Blower. She was 36. Now Elizabeth's father was a gentleman from Kent, and a gentleman was below an esquire but above a yeoman. And I believe a yeoman is a person with a small farm holding. But he was landed gentry. Now, in this year of 1656, Oliver Cromwell, Lord Protector of England, governs England itself and the Commonwealth. Now, if we just have a look, there's graffiti here. It's most likely there was the same family because the W as the surname. Now, if you look next to the sedilia, we have the piscina, 1240. Now, the piscina is a Latin word for fish pond, used for washing the communal vessels from Mass. Now, piscinas were rare in England until the 13th century. The sacred holy water drains into the fabric of the wall itself. Now above the high altar we have the reredos, not so old, 1934. And I believe it's a scene of the shepherds of Bethlehem. An angel of the Lord appeared to them. Suddenly a great company of heavenly host appeared with the angel. And the shepherds said to one another, "Let's go to Bethlehem and see this thing that has happened, and the Lord has told us about." You see Bethlehem in the background. So now we shall make our way down and have a look at the chancel painting, which is above the arch. So the chancel wall paintings were discovered in 1890 during restorations here. This wall painting dates from between 1325 and 1330, and it is believed that a group of skilled painters who also worked on churches at White Notley, not far from here, Beauchamp Water and East Hanningfield painted this. And I'm just going to put the light on. Now, originally, the rood loft, a raised balcony, would have stood in front of these paintings, and you can imagine the elaborate wooden screen obscuring the vivid paintings we see in front of us. The villagers and travellers would have been in awe at the scenes from Jerusalem. Now, back in 1890, Rector Ernest Geldart of Little Braxted was also a trained architect and expert on medieval decorations, and he would advise the Reverend Manning of Fairstead to preserve the paintings as they are. So you can imagine that a fair amount of these were painted over. Now, these paintings were painted during the reign of either Edward II or III. Now, there is a booklet here that explains each painting individually. Now, if we look in the corner here, I'm pointing my finger, this is a 13th century Crusaders tomb lid. Now, it's most likely connected to the de Ferrers family, who owned this manor from 1190 till 1471. Now, William de Ferrers himself was a Crusader knight on the Third Crusade in 1190. Successive members of the de Ferrers family went on crusade right up until the mid-13th century, and this family showed considerable commitment to crusade expeditions. And this would be the time this church was extended. And you can still make out the carving there. And it looks like possibly a sword, and this could be the pommel, the handle, I'm guessing, totally a guess. So we shall make our way to this chest. And look at this, it's quite incredible. Now, this is a beautiful and hand dug out chest from one single oak tree and trunk. It is squared off at the end. It has two hollowed out sections, and each lid retains its roundility of the tree trunk. Let me lift this up. Now the chest is bound by iron straps which pass over and under further straps and are nailed to the oak lid. And we can see this side has been broken off, but this side survives intact. See where the key would go in there. Now originally this chest was kept in the West Tower. It's believed to be from the 13th century. And we're now going to go into the West Tower. Now inside the old tower you can see the organ. We can just make out where the bell ropes used to go. And if you look at that steel ring, you can see how it's worn from the rope. And inside a plaque talks about the rector and the church warden who paid for this right at the beginning of World War II. So we shall now leave this lovely old church. So the tower itself is 1200, and this is a very early English period West Tower. It's 14 feet square and it's built in 3 stages. And on top sits an octagonal brooch spire, which is the 16th century, which is about the newest part of the church. Now we can see straight away these coins are, the corners are made of Roman brick and tile. And if you look, you can see what they call the putlocks, which is where they used to put pieces of timber to hold up the scaffolding boards. Actually, you can see a close one here. And the wood rots out and they've just put some masonry in there. Now in this corner you can clearly see the tiles from the Roman period. So there would have been a villa here at least 1200 or 1100. So this is 1200. So this is Roman brick, and you can see the tiles from the roof. So it must have been quite a big building. And down here we have pudding stone, which is from the last ice age of 11,700 years ago. And you can see where the sand is fused with the pebbles. Now if we look, we've got two headstones which are right up against the west wall. So on the right hand side we have a James Carter, 1829. Now in this year of 1829 a duel is fought between the Duke of Wellington and the Earl of Winchelsea. Both men deliberately fire off target and honour is established without injury. Also in this year, HMS Pickle, the Royal Naval ship, captures the armed slave ship Volodoro off the coast of Cuba. And the last mutineer of last mutineer of HMS Bounty dies on Pitcairn Island. The descendants still live to this day on that island. What a magnificent door. Now this church has 4 bells. The earliest is 1340, Peter de Weston. Now Peter was a well-respected early bell founder of London. His earliest bell was cast in 1335, so it'll be 5 years before this one, and his last in 1360. We have a Richard Bowler of 1601, a Colchester bell founder. We have a Thomas Gardner of 1725, a Sudbury bell founder. And Thomas Gardner cast an impressive 203 bells. We have a Thomas Osborne of 1785, a Downham Market bell founder, also cast an impressive 258 bells. It's a fascinating buttress because it shows so many different variations of brick from the different periods. Now this impresses me the most, this doorway here. If we look at this doorway, this is the original south doorway. It's got the 13th century blocked doorway here. But if you look above it, we have an 11th century Norman doorway using Roman bricks in a semicircular. This is seriously old. Now this doorway for me has the most character and variation in materials of any of the south doors I've come across, I think. Would make fascinating viewing who had entered and left by this very doorway. Now we're looking at a buttress on the south wall, and this is 17th century, made of brick, and it's got crow-stepped offset. Now just think that this was built in the time perhaps of Oliver Cromwell, James I, maybe even when the Mayflower ship sailed for Massachusetts. Now we're going around to the chancel itself. We have a further doorway. Now if you can remember from inside, we had the small lower window, and there was a doorway which was cutting into the sedilia, which will be this one. Now the doorway itself is 16th century. The window itself, to the left, you can see it's been heavily repaired over the centuries, but this is 13th century. And I'm just wondering if this was a leper's squint window, which would have protected by a wooden shutter or bars, and this would allow viewing to the altar by lepers or non-desirables from outside here. Now if we look closer, this is the original stonework, and you can see where the bars would have gone in. And you can also see the difference. This 16th century they've used Tudor type brick, and if we pan across we can see the difference of the Roman brick. Now if we move a little bit further we can see where the original chancel ends. So this would be 1100 and this would be 1240. We shall continue round to the other side. You can still see Roman brick. So we know that in 1240 there would have been a structure from the Roman period still intact, or not intact but parts of it. Now we can clearly see where the old and the new chancel met. Now we've gone full circle. So St Mary St Peter's Church is open for baptisms, weddings and funerals, and it's very much part of the community, and I hope you enjoyed that. Thank you very much.